Everyday life can sometimes seem ordinary. So it's natural to crave something more. As it turns out, all you have to do is step inside.
Well, a big thing for me was I didn't want it to be a documentary. You know, Cirque have experimented with documentaries before, and while they've worked for the Cirque fans, they haven't really reached beyond that. And I really wanted to try and create a film that allowed people to experience the joy that I got out of sort of seeing these Cirque shows and that experience that I had seeing the first one of really being transported into this dream world. And I just wanted the movie to be able to convey that experience of those live shows. It is. It takes you to places you can't see on stage. It allows you to see every act from the best seat in the house. It takes you underwater where you obviously can't go. It gets you up close to the performances and shows you what they're doing in slow motion. So it does offer a very different experience from the stage one. I wouldn't say it's a better experience. I think it's equal but different. Well, it did seem like just an appropriate time to bring these two, this technology and this art form together. Sort of compare it to what Walt Disney did with Fantasia, when animation and music and the technology all came together at the right time, and it seemed like the right time for this. I was obviously greatly assisted by Jim and his experience with 3D, which is fairly extensive, and the fact that I was using his equipment. But, I learned kind of on the job. I sort of found out, what kind of cameras work for wide shots, when to be close, how to extend the sort of 3D experience by having a number of different view planes within the camera at any time. So the guiding principle really was what looks cool and trying to capture that. Yeah, I think, the first thing for me was the proximity issue. It's something he'd experimented with. I think a lot of people, particularly shooting shows and events, tend to stick a few 3D cameras in the air and say it's 3D. But the first thing that he said is, no, the closer you can get the camera, the better. And sort of once we made that leap and then figured out how to get the camera close, which is quite difficult at times, I think that was the most useful thing. Yeah, I would describe it as an experimental film. It was a sort of a challenge. It's like, well, for one, I liked Cirque, and I liked the idea of being able to, share that experience with an audience. And then the other thing for me was sort of challenge is how can I take this stage performance and make it work in cinema? How can I take a non-narrative, non-dialogue-driven film and make it appeal to a wide audience? All of those things are sort of interesting challenges, and I like to do things that are a little bit risky. A bit of fun. It seemed like a fun thing to do. I really have been a big fan of the work they do. As I met the people involved, I really liked the people. A chance to do something with Jim. There's sort of any number of different motivations, but largely there wasn't really a good reason not to. It seemed like a fun thing to try and do. Well, no, he came on, actually, I started the film, and then he joined us, and You know, it ended up just being this great collaboration. I hope to actually collaborate with them again. You know, you never know how those things are going to go. You never know if there's going to be ego clashes or control issues or anything. And there really wasn't. It was something that we just both enjoyed doing. Well, I'd experimented with a little bit in animation. You know, we'd looked at converting Shrek, and in fact, some of the Shreks were converted on for DVD release and so on. My feeling was sometimes it was used inappropriately. I think a lot of people just went into the idea that you stick a 3D camera or you'd stick a 2D camera and the film is 3D and it could get misused. I think likewise it can be used as a gimmick, and I think all of those things you need to be careful of. When I go and watch a 3D film, you know, Prometheus I think was a wonderful use of 3D. It added something to the film. Avatar, obviously. But I'd like to say that once you kind of transport in that world, you stop being conscious of it. I think if you find yourself thinking about the 3D too much while watching a film, particularly a narrative film that's meant to be emotionally involving, if you find yourself thinking about technique, then that's an issue. And I think in some cases it's been misused where the technique has become too much part of the story. I do think this film sits somewhere between, to be honest, because it's not an art film and it's not a traditional blockbuster kind of thing, but it's a sort of a broader audience than perhaps films like Pina. So it kind of exists in the middle of it. But largely, you know, I will say that while there's sort of an emotional journey, so it is a film that's largely about spectacle. And likewise, some of the blockbuster kind of films that you're talking about are more spectacle than they are necessarily story or emotionally based. And I think that's where this technique excels. You know, at the same time, there are huge blockbusters like The Dark Knight that weren't 3D and were not affected negatively at the box office. So, you know, I don't know. I think it really is just an aesthetic choice. It's like when you make a film, do you want it to be 3D or not? Is it going to add anything to the experience, or is it going to take anything away from the experience? Is it going to add to the box office? All those things come into play. But I think at the end of the day, people go and see a film because they want to see the content more than how it's presented.